Good afternoon. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
All right. And welcome to the Richmond Legislative Work Summit for the 2017 Virginia General Assembly Legislative Session. It gives me great pleasure to extend to you a very warm welcome, and we are grateful for everyone who accepted our invitation. We are honored to have members of the Virginia General Assembly Legislative Delegation representing Richmond here today. And we're also honored to have members of Richmond City Council and the Richmond Public School Board of Trustees. I would also like to thank our Richmond City Council staff who made this event possible, and you all always do all the heavy lifting and make the magic happen. So thank each and every one of you for a job well done. And if we could just give our staff our applause, please. I would also like to welcome and congratulate all those here today who have been newly elected to new positions. We're done with that. Yay! All right. Could each of those here today who were recently elected to a new position please rise and remain standing for a round of applause? And seems like if we could just go around the room and you can just tell us what you were elected to, that would be great. That's you.
Me?
Yes, make it happen. Okay.
Larson, I'm currently on the school board for 4th District, elected to City Council.
Awesome, thank you. This summit is an opportunity. We have someone else? Yes, yes. Mayor-elect, we need you this way. Just say who you are and what you were elected to and how exciting.
Oh, I'm LeVar Stoney, Maryland.
Yes! Jeff, you want to tell us you're elected to school board again? Are you excited about that?
Jeff Ward, I'm elected to the school board.
Yes, all right. All right, so this summit is an opportunity to discuss possibilities and to continue to build on the progress and legislation that benefit all Richmonders. Thank each and every one of you for your dedication and work on behalf of the residents of Richmond. As most of you know, each year Richmond prepares proposals for your thoughtful consideration and asks for your kind support in the upcoming Virginia General Assembly session. Each year, the members of the Richmond, Virginia General Assembly delegation have been extremely committed and supportive in keeping important initiatives moving forward and in helping prevent legislation that would negatively impact our residents. Each year, you have also shared your wisdom and insight on initiatives that you are bringing forward and have let us know how we can support you in your important work. We look forward to our continuing friendship and our continuing tradition of open dialogue, discussion, and mutual support. We have a number of proposals this year that Ron will be talking with you about shortly. I especially want to mention the Virginia Local Composite Index of Ability to Pay. We hope that you will be able to get the long-needed review. Thank you. We hope that you will get the long-needed review, the LCI formula, to identify the demands on local revenue for serving a higher percentage of at-risk children. As you all know, the LCI formula is heavily weighted towards real property values, adjusted gross income, and taxable sales. What this means is that a few outliers can easily skew these factors, giving false assumptions regarding needs. The formula also does not include elements that recognize the demands on local revenue for serving a higher percentage of at-risk children. The LCI needs to be revised to include the additional demands on a division's available local resources required to serve a large at-risk student population. Thank you for your consideration, and thank you very much again for your consideration of all of our proposals and for your ongoing commitment to Richmond residents. Also, for those who like to plan, like me, next year's summit will be held on Wednesday, November 15th, 2017. Thank you.
Thank you, President Mosby. I'm Mark Cronenthal. I'm the Mayor Jones's Chief of Staff. On behalf of Mayor Jones, I'd like to welcome Senator Sturdivant, Delegates McClellan, LaPasse, and McQuinn, Council Members Mosby, Beliles, Samuels, Robertson, Newbill, Councilperson-elect Larson, congratulations, and School Board Member Chairman Jeff Bourne. Coming off of election season, we can forget how closely our legislative delegation, the mayor, the city council, and the school board work together to make Richmond a better place. And we can also forget a lot of the good news that we've been able to share over the last couple of years, and I'm lucky to be able to share some more good news right now. The mayor has just announced that in its the city and the public utility in its bond sale yesterday has achieved a debt service savings of $100 million. That will be accomplished over the next 24 years, $100 million. And as best as our financial advisors can determine, that level of debt service savings is the largest, the greatest in Virginia local government history. So we have some things to celebrate going forward. There's a lot of work to do. Obviously, that's why we're here. We look forward to hearing what Mr. Jordan has to say about the things that we have to work on. So I'm going to hand over the microphone to Ron Jordan, our representative to the General Assembly.
I just told Luke, I'm going to come down here so I'm closer to you. Oh, Deborah's going to say something.
Hello to all of you here today. I am Joyce Davis, representing the Council Chief of Staff Office under the leadership of Lou Brown-Ali, Chief of Staff, and Megan Brown, Deputy Chief of Staff. Thank you, Ms. Mosby, for acknowledging the hard work of my co-workers Steve Skinner, Deborah Shaw, Bill, and Steve T., and all in the Council office to complete preparations for this session with you. It is always a relief when I can hand over the list of finalized items, when all of the logistics have been completed by Deborah and you have the brochure in front of you prepared by Steve Skinner. We meet at a moment in history when the demand for lawmakers to come together in unity and camaraderie to form strong and enduring partnerships has never been greater. In preparing our legislative agenda, Council staff has worked diligently over the past year to follow up on the concerns of Council members and constituents to formulate agenda items. I'm especially proud of the process this year because we actually followed up with concerns of members, collaborated with other departments, and then went to Ron so that we could come up with what you have before you as a part of the brochure. We've worked with police departments, we've worked with DPU, but we actually sat around the table, not just a symbolic table. The unity, camaraderie, and partnership of council, administration, and community issues has definitely formed our legislative agenda. As a part of all of the tasks, we conduct research data collection to arrive at final recommendations. Council staff has worked with Ron Jordan, our lobbyist, over the last year to pare down the list. And again, in the brochure, you will see our list of priorities that he will share with you. I'd like to cover Ron's background. Ron has extensive policy, program, and budget experience gained during nearly 30 years in state and local government that includes positions as a longtime senior staff member of the Virginia House of Delegates Appropriations Committee and in the Governor's Cabinet. Ron has served as the former Deputy Secretary of Public Safety, Director of Planning and Research for the Virginia State Police. Ron has specific areas of expertise that include appropriations, finance, technology, public safety, and natural resource matters. From his bio that is included in your packet, I like this particular paragraph that says, his experience in turning ideas into action has been instrumental in bringing diverse groups together to solve problems and successfully implement new programs and legislation. We're so grateful for the work that Ron has conducted with us and he is here today to share our agenda. We thank you once again for being here, and we hope this session will give you a clear understanding of our legislative needs for the city of Richmond. We hope you will enjoy this session. Please enjoy your lunch. Ron Jones.
Council and the mayor's office, they asked me to facilitate this part of it. And this year's a little bit different in that council's not formally adopted these yet. The hope was that using feedback that we get from you all today would allow the council to tweak these a little bit as needed and before they do a formal adoption in early December and go forward from that perspective. I know Delegate McQueen and Delegate Carr just came from the Appropriations Committee retreat yesterday and today, and we talked over there, and I know they have some things they want to share with you. Would you all prefer to wait towards the end? Okay, thank you. And so let's go ahead and start. Some of these you've seen before. The first is urban street maintenance funding formula, and as you know, the city's spends more than almost as much as it gets from the state in terms of its own dollars for urban street maintenance. The formula is based on lane miles. The city's proposed legislation last year, Delegate Carr carried it, that resulted in a study by VDOT of the urban street maintenance formula issued. They provided the results to Delegate Carr this week, and I think the delegate has some thoughts on how it might be best to proceed with that. The delegate has some ideas on how best to proceed with that, but I think it's safe to say that it's something we need to continue to move forward on, but we're going to need to build a coalition around this issue. Because anytime you mess with the formula, there will be winners and losers, and it will require additional money. And we have a list of those thanks to the VDOT study, and we can pull together a coalition over the next between now and next session, and really get some momentum for this. But it will require additional money from the legislature in order to make it work without having a series of winners and losers. And when the bill came up last year, it became clear some of our sister cities in particular were going to be on the opposite side of the fence of us. So we need to, and we think we can move forward on that in the future. On the local composite index, everyone around this table is familiar with that issue. We've been beating on it. Delegate McClellan and I have sat in the House Rules Committee many times with a study to be shot down, and we've also carried some, I think Delegate McQuinn and Delegate Carr also had budget amendments to make some changes in the LCI. The LCI, everyone agrees it needs to be improved. It hasn't been changed essentially since the early 80s. However, no one wants to open the door. There's a fear that if you open Pandora's box, you don't know what you're going to end up with. And every time the LCI has been changed, there's been a substantial amount of additional money put in to ensure that no winners and losers. But the LCI is more than a distribution formula. It also is used to calculate the state's requirements. So if you tweak it in some ways, like we tried to do a couple of years ago, it turns out it results in less state money going into K-12. And so it's what we've been proposing is a JLARC study, and I think there's some growing consensus, I know in some other localities to do that, but I think we need to keep moving forward and keep the pressure on. There also are some other areas that you need to be aware of. The State Board of Education has recommended changes in the standards of quality, which in fact would, in many cases, would recognize more of what local school divisions are already doing. But in turn, that would drive more state money if they were actually funded. And that effort actually lists all votes, improvements in the SOQ if adopted and backed by funding. And if you've got thoughts, let's stop and talk. I'd rather do that than just kind of stop.
Right. What's the objection? I can guess, but what's the objection to the JLARC bonus study?
The House of Delegates does not like to pass very many studies, and typically each year, 1 or 2 or 3. The real objection is not so much, well, there are two. There's the practical objection and there's the policy objection. The policy objection Ron touched on is there is a fear, particularly among those communities in Southwest Virginia, that as with any funding formula, if you would open it up, there'll be winners and losers, and they fear they will be the losers. Because it's not just the city of Richmond. There are a lot of Northern Virginia communities, including Fairfax, that over the past session put in bills to change the formula. So it's not just us, but the rural area legislators in Southwest kind of dominate the rules committee where these go. So that's the policy objection. The practical objection is that studies are not very popular in the House of Delegates. Very few pass every year, and it's basically those that are a high priority for those that are in charge.
The reason I bring that up is the paper yesterday, the JLARC study of economic development partnership, has revealed that it's been running for 20 years unchecked, and all of a sudden that study has a very substantial purpose. And the House has already taken action to stop based on the recommendation. And that's why I think maybe we want to include that in our argument profile this year, that clearly that study is going to pay off.
It is, and there were some other issues that were driving that too. There were some political issues that drove the impetus of that study, that some partisan issues, and it's part of the world. But yes, it's clearly uncovered, and there's been suspicion all along there's been problems in VDEP here in the locality and others. The next one is comprehensive poverty reduction. You may remember last year there was an initiative that was originated with the city and the community wealth building program, and the initiative that was put forth under the umbrella of Virginia First Cities Coalition was to create a fund to seed anti-poverty initiatives in urban areas. That wasn't successful. We think we should revisit that. It's a good initiative. We'd like your support for that again. And also, there may be an opportunity, since Go Virginia appears like it's going to be tweaked a little bit, perhaps tweak some of that legislation to recognize or provide funding for anti-poverty initiatives in local governments, where a couple local governments can come together on some anti-poverty initiatives. And I know there have been discussions with both counties along the Jeff Davis corridor and the east end of Richmond about joint efforts on some things, and so that might be an opportunity to, if you could tweak the Go Virginia legislation to deal with some of those, to encourage some of that.
Ron, I have a question. Can we go back to the LCI?
Yes, ma'am.
I think I'm hearing that different cities individually are asking. Have we had a conversation where we're all sister cities and those with the need are getting together as assembly members to go after this together versus Richmond and that one and that one? How do we have a camaraderie to go and have this conversation?
Well, the issue is each locality. So last year there were a number of bills put in by Northern Virginia counties, representatives of Northern Virginia counties, and some of the cities for specific tweaks to the LCI to address specific problems that those jurisdictions face. And that was because everybody recognized just asking for a study is not going to work. And I think a few years ago, Senator Watkins said, stop asking for a study and ask for the changes you want. And so those jurisdictions did that. The problem is they all went to the Education Committee, where everybody agreed something needs to happen, but the place to look at it is the House Appropriations Committee. So every one of those bills was referred to the House Appropriations Committee, where they died, because nobody wanted to open up the formula. So that's the practical reality we're facing, is everybody agrees that the formula as it is now doesn't work. But not enough people are willing to take a risk on, can we do it better? And until we get 51 votes and 21 votes of people who are comfortable moving forward doing that, or not even that, we can't even get it out of committee. That's the challenge we have. Now, we need to keep trying, and we are having those conversations through Virginia First City, I think VML and Bayville are having those conversations as well. The Association of School Boards is having that conversation. And I think if we just have to keep trying, so one day, maybe it'll happen.
And the Appropriations Committee members are from what part of our?
Everyone.
Everyone.
It's not. Okay, so I was on the city council and sitting kind of where you are a long time ago, 12 years ago or something, and we were having the same conversations. And you know, it's not necessarily a partisan thing. It's more of a regional type thing. And so whenever you talk about changing something, someone's going to win, someone's going to lose. So people, and nobody really knows when you open it up who's going to win and who's going to lose. So they're not like, they're not like dying to change it, but so much. You follow me?
I do.
So it's just difficult. It's just a difficult situation. And but anyway, it's always in our legislative proposal, and we're aware of the situation. And you know, there's some of us. The only thing you do is keep trying. There's some of us who are either on education or on appropriations, and they're in the best position to, you know, strongly advocate. They're in a better position to advocate. And then, you know, but we, you know, to the extent we can, we'll continue to try to work on this issue.
Ron, if I may, because I think what this is boiling down to is funding, getting funding from the state that we can then make sure is going into public education, right? And I think the challenge is going to ultimately still be getting any funding from the state for any purpose is the greatest challenge that a locality has. Perhaps it's one of those where instead of focusing on the LCI, we can get our legislators to agree to require that when it comes to the service fees and others that the state is required to pay under state statute for its properties in the city boundaries, that it's paying us a full amount instead of a lesser appropriated amount. You all are going to be moving into the Pocahontas office building as you all transition your offices. The city gets $0 from the Pocahontas office building because it resides underneath something called the Virginia Building Authority that is exempt from the pilot. And yet all the legislators are going to be serving in a building that doesn't support the firemen who are going to come and protect your office from burning down. If we can get you all to appropriate the funding in a different mechanism that flows to the city of Richmond, maybe then we can help support more funding through the general fund in public schools to ultimately get to the game that we're trying to affect.
Can I ask Ron a question?
Let's make a conversation.
So, Ron, you've got this item number 3, the property reduction. Do you all have a proposed piece of legislation that you want us to consider?
Yes, we do.
Okay. Would you get that?
Sure.
Okay.
Okay.
I'd like to take a look at that.
And on we're on education funding, most of the school divisions seem to be coalescing around changes to the standards of quality. Just for some of the council members, the General Assembly provides funding for the standard of quality that are adopted by the State Board of Education. They dictate the number of assistant principals, the principals, the number of the teacher ratio, and number of guidance counselors, and so forth. The state does not fund actual practice. What is out there is actually far below what actual practice, and so the incremental amount above what the state funds is called local effort. So what the state board has done is they have recently adopted some new standards for quality that recognize some that improve, make those ratios better. So that, and if they're funded, that means everybody's going to get more money, and that seems to be what more and more folks are coalescing around, because there's common interest among all the local governments and school divisions that the state's not paying its fair share. It's not that distribution, it's easier to make the argument that the state's not paying its fair share. And to coalesce people around that idea and drive more. And we've seen, and we saw movement on that last year with the restoration by the General Assembly of the lottery funding. And if the dollars were there, they would be putting more into it. I'm convinced of that. And so that may be as we go forward, the better way to attack this issue. And the LCI, I'll buy dinner for all of you, ethics rules notwithstanding. If the state's position doesn't improve in the LCI next year with the next benchmark, there are a number of things in the way the LCI is calculated that the data from the counties will catch up on real estate values and will actually improve the city's position in that regard. Because the LCI is dynamic. It's recalculated every 2 years based on new data.
So, I'd like to just ask, I think one of the challenges that we face a lot is because we have such intense concentrated poverty and the cost factors as it relates to per student costs, and as a part of our poverty legislation as to whether or not we can propose, and I know that there's studies that have been done as it relates to the intensity of poverty, not just poverty itself, but the concentration and the intensity and the per student cost as it relates to that we can incorporate maybe another formula as it relates to the per student cost based on that, rather than as we work toward looking at the LCI.
I'll bring something back to you guys before final adoption and try to build that in.
I do.
And Ron, can I speak to this comprehensive poverty reduction? Because I don't want to, I mean, I think that it is something that we certainly need to keep before the GA. I know if you look at that Virginia funding, that's still up in air in terms of how it's going to function and the I guess the criteria in which you would ask for funding from that. So I think, I mean, there still could possibly be some flexibility in it, but, you know, they have not perfected it yet.
Right.
And so that's a problem. But again, I think based on the level of poverty that exists in the city of Richmond and for that much, point in terms of the region in the city of Richmond, that you must keep it before them, before the GA, and help them to understand the magnitude of the problem that we're dealing with, and that you need some help if you're going to move anywhere. And I'm hoping that, I've had some conversations about poverty reduction in the last couple of weeks with several folks, including people from the business community and the university. And I'm hoping that there is some way that there could be some collaboration between the city, the business community, the universities and all, to make something happen. And that way, when you have something that you can take to the state and say, now, we also need additional support from you. But I'm hoping we can move in that kind of direction where you have everyone trying to work toward the reduction.
I think that's certainly the intent here with it.
Yeah, okay.
Next item is Airbnb, short-term rental.
I'm sorry, before we get too far, I'm just concerned that my point wasn't about pilot hasn't been addressed. Okay, so this building that we're sitting in today is assessed at $80 million, and yet this building doesn't contribute a dime to the city's budget. This building that we're sitting in.
I think that
It's always, let me say this.
But council has the ability, if we so choose, to assess a service fee onto these public authorities. And we could, and just put the demand back on you, but it would be better if it just was fully funded from the state side.
Well, first of all, I don't want anyone to lose the point that this has been an ongoing discussion over the years. This is not new. It's always been a discussion in terms of the amount of property, particularly in the city of Richmond, that funds are not going to work back to the city's coffer, but yet the property is there. And so, we can continue that discussion. As in, and I know it's been discussed 10 years ago and even 20 years ago, I'm just not sure where it's going to go. But we can continue it.
And by way of most recent example, the city, as you know, the state now owns Portland Road. And the city of Hampton came to the state last year, wanted pilot a substantial increase. The city said, the state said, we'll give you, I believe it's about $200,000 a year at pilot.
Ron, so is the state paying pilots
Some.
anywhere? I mean, are they?
Yes, it's
So
just county.
is there a comparison between the city of Richmond and other localities though? Like, Norfolk is the home of the port.
There's a formula in the code that determines how much pilots should be paid. And what the General Assembly's done is cap the amounts that they pay.
And when you say capped, it's not capped at the formula amount.
No, it's capped
at
by
their
dollars at their
decision.
discretion.
So I want to know where, compared to Norfolk and compared to Hampton and other places, where do we fit in? Are we getting our fair share?
We can pull that together for you.
But the difference is that we're in the capital, and so we have a different amount of buildings than what they would have in that cap.
Disproportionate because we're the capital city.
I'm trying to convey the sense of the state with the Hampton situation is the state's responded, we don't have to give you anything.
But Ron, if I can make a separate point, that's under properties that are within the GSA, right? Not these that are under some other public authority, such as the Virginia Public Building Authority, the Virginia Body.
No, the Fort Monroe is owned by the Commonwealth and by the Fort Monroe Redevelopment Authority.
Okay. And I was gonna say, like, the VHDA building there on Belvedere Street pays zero. That's VHDA. It's not necessarily state, it's an authority of the state. But under state code, the city can assess a service charge to them because they're an authority, just like RRHA is an authority or RMTA is an authority or some of these others. So, and at that point, we have the ability to collect on those.
Okay, and we'll get the information that Mr. Stoney's requested. We'll get the information and share it with everyone. The next item is Airbnb. You'll see there, as you know, the Housing Commission, the bills from last year were referred to the Housing Commission for study. There are a couple of criteria that the city is concerned about that they'd like to make sure is preserved in any legislation that gets enacted. First, that the taxes are collected and made available to the city and can be confirmed by audit. And secondly, that the city retains land use controls. Those are the big things that the city's concerned about in Airbnb legislation. The next item deals with the council salaries. And a bill last year would have increased the cap on salaries for town and city council members across the state. They're currently capped by population category in the Code of Virginia. The statute would have raised them in relationship to the increases to the inflationary increase since it was last done about 25 years ago. The bill was sent by the chairman of the subcommittee to the Commission on Local Government for study, for data collection and study. In conversation with the staff and Commission on Local Government, they expect to have the report finished by the end of this month and communicated to the chairman of that committee in early December. Since I think this is an issue that has a little bit longer term look now, we got another 3 years before anything can actually happen anyway. So I just want to let you know that's where that stands. On exception, the next item comes from the police department. This would allow the local governments to levy fines for excessive use of police services under the nuisance statute.
Ron, just to be clear, this is being advanced, but it's not yet necessarily one that the city council has approved.
Right. This came from the police department.
I just fear that this would render some people silent because of the fear that they're going to get charged with some fine for calling and reporting something that maybe the police have deemed that they've just called too frequently. But you know, I would hesitate, asking my colleagues to move that one forward.
Next item would require that anyone.
You're not going to greater specificity relative
Absolutely,
to,
okay.
because I don't know what that is.
The ones from the police, from the administration came in the last few days, so we haven't had time to get behind them yet, so we included them here for discussion.
So you can provide that to us by the
Yes, ma'am.
time.
Reporting stolen firearms would require owners of firearms to report if the firearm is stolen to local law enforcement within 24, state police within 24 hours. The next one would require a person who's driving or otherwise in charge of a motor vehicle not to leave the vehicle unattended until the engine is stopped, the ignition is locked, and the brakes set. We'll give you more information on that one. And the final one from the police department would clarify in the code that law enforcement vehicles can use a steady burning blue light, like, as you know, the city police currently do on their vehicles. And I know a number of other, from my travels around the state, a number of other local governments are doing the same thing, have that steady blue light.
Ron, before you go on, with number 7, reporting of stolen firearms, that's with the understanding that the owner acknowledged that their gun has been stolen or lost, right?
That would be my assumption.
Okay.
All I know is what's
Okay.
here right now.
Because I imagine people tuck it away sometimes and not come back for maybe even months, and when they go back and find that it's gone, I mean, yeah, okay.
Hopefully, we don't benefit.
I'm like, okay.
People do it. The last one here, it deals with the natural gas utility. As many of you may, actually a couple of you are probably aware, the State Corporation Commission does not define and decide where the municipal gas utility can serve. There's, to ensure that the municipal gas utility can grow, the Public Utilities is asking for the General Assembly to define and decide where the municipal gas utility in Virginia can serve natural gas customers and restrict the expansion by private natural gas companies into those areas. This arises out of a dispute between the gas works and Columbia Gas, and it would go to Commerce and Labor, where I think it would be it's a heavy lift. But remember, Delegate McCullough, you stood on there. I defer to you on. All three of y'all.
I think the biggest issue is just getting them to understand.
Exactly. That was my.
You can explain it to me.
It is a complex issue because in Virginia, and Richmond is only one of 3 municipalities that have gas works. It's Richmond, Danville, and Charlottesville, I believe, are the only 3 that have municipal gas works. So it's a pretty unique and specialized issue.
And Ron, remind me, have you all had conversations with Columbia Gas?
It just, I know utilities have had some, and there have been some litigation, but no work's been done on this proposal at this point in time.
If they don't oppose it, and the State Corporation Commission typically does not take a position on the bill, it should be fine.
My
If they
understanding
oppose
is
it,
Virginia natural gas is neutral. I don't know where Columbia would
I got it.
The remaining items there deal with position statements, most of which you've seen before, dealing with asking you to support legislation restricting firearms in government buildings, expanding the background check on close the gun show loophole, and ban the sale of assault-style weapons and mega-sized ammunition magazines. The 4th item there is asking for your support once again to implement the Food Desert Initiative that grew out of a legislative initiative by Delegate McQuinn and Senator Ruff. The governor provided funding in the last budget for it, but it was removed by the Appropriations Committee and the Senate Finance Committee. The next item would ask for your support for Medicaid expansion, and in the event that you cannot do that, Then come up with your, a Virginia method for providing, expanding health care to working Virginians.
Ron, for number one, firearms in government buildings, I'm gonna be carrying some, bill asking that they will be prohibited, firearms will be prohibited in libraries. So, which is government building, but not all of them, because I'm gonna ask about libraries.
And the last item there is with the city would extend its support to the legislative priorities of the municipal league and First Cities. With that, Delegate McQueen, Delegate Carr, could you share some of the wisdom that you've gained over the last day about what's going on in the, hold on.
Can I just say one thing, since we've summarized here? For the local delegates and senators, the Richmond Regional Planning District Commission is not submitting to you all a collective region-wide legislative summary. It's different this year. Before, they would give you kind of a list of all the things that they collectively agreed to. And that's not going to be happening. So each jurisdiction is coming at you separately. Just so you're aware of that in case you're expecting something. The RRPDC.
PDC.
Just a question about why all of these items aren't being requested versus support. And I recognize the likelihood of expansion of Medicaid is probably close to.
Everybody can't hear you, Doc.
I'm sorry.
So,
How about now?
there you go.
Thank you, Madam President. Okay, so my question for Ron is why these items aren't all requests versus simply support on the section B, 1 through 6, notwithstanding the fact that what do you choose from? Medicaid expansion is not one. Still, the position here is that we have, yes, exactly. So,
Okay, sure. The intent is always, as we begin this process, to have a short, actionable list. And the priority setting the council typically uses, the items with the highest priority are the items that affect foremost and only the city of Richmond, directly affect the city of Richmond and only affect the city of Richmond. Those rise right to the top. Then the next highest priority are items that may be of regional or statewide significance, but the city has a tremendous impact on the city. So that's how we rise to this, to come to this. In addition, there's in the discussion, one of the things that's generally has been considered by council is, okay, what are its prospects? What's the track record with it? And so in order to have an actionable list to you, we've tried over the years to keep it short. It stays at about this size. It stayed, as you all know, about this size for every year. And so there are other things that the council feels very strongly about, but may not be actionable for you all. And so those have traditionally gone in the support category.
okay, I may come back to you on that one. Just saying.
Well, I think it's safe to say that for the ones, the support statements under B, somebody's already going to introduce those. Whereas the ones under A, those are specific requests that if Richmond didn't ask for it, it may not happen.
That's fair. That's quite accurate. We know somebody's going to introduce stuff on the others.
Is there a weapon sold, assault style weapon sold in Richmond? Is there a store?
I don't know if there are any gun stores in Richmond.
But is this Richmond?
Well, the delegate, I don't know if there's anybody that sells any gun stores in Richmond. First, Delegate Lupasi asked what's an assault weapon, and that has always gotten to the heart of legislation that deals with this issue. Is how you define.
It's what is.
What is it?
You don't know what military style assault weapon is.
What is it?
It's something that they don't use to kill deer with, okay?
And believe it or not, without getting too far into it, I actually do know, well, I don't know that person, there are people who use, an AR-15 is typically considered an assault style weapon. But believe it or not, there are people who use those types of weapons for hunting. For deer hunting. I mean, the bullet is not any different than a bolt action, not much different than what you find in a bolt action 30-06 typical hunting rifle.
It's very destructive.
So, I have a question. There are some items that I appreciate, your comments, in regards to some of these things under section B. There will probably already be legislation introduced. I'm interested in knowing whether or not we know if there's gonna be any legislation that addresses, transit, as a means of transportation, because that's one of the areas that Richmond is making a significant investment, but we really need to expand upon that as it relates to, from a regional perspective as well. And also looking at whether or not there are legislation that may already be in process as relates to transit. The other thing that I'm interested in knowing whether or not there's some legislation on is dealing with blight. You know, we have a lot of blighted properties, abandoned blighted properties for 20, 30 plus years that, you know, the tools that we have in our tool chest is not as effective as they need to be. And whether or not we can look at some ways of addressing that. And the other thing is this great concern that we have as it relates to the pipeline to prison, some of the policies that are in place that are practiced that tends to not, you know, it tends to address the problem that is at hand that you're dealing with, and that needs to be addressed, but because of some of those policies and the outcome of those policies, we tend to set ourselves up for more young people being in that pipeline to prison. And I know we've had a lot of discussion about that. And so I think trying to get some feedback from the legislators on whether or not there's anything on the books to deal with that transportation, blighted properties, and having more tools to work with that, and then the policies that are allowed for pipeline to prison.
Thanks, Ron. All right, so one thing, Mr. Mayor, I want to bring up to you, like 2 years ago, right before we had the bike race, the city asked to have, I can't remember exactly, Ron knows, but they asked to have permission to convert some lanes of traffic into bike lanes, permanent bike lanes.
It was legislation that kept the city from losing state money for converting bike lanes.
Right. So anyway, so I put in the legislation, it turned into a big firefight. I don't know why, I still for the life of me can't understand, but anyway, it turned into a situation. But here's the thing.
But it did pass.
Well, but it took some doing, man.
You worked hard on it.
It took some doing. All
I
right.
remember you and Habib going at it.
Yeah, right. So anyway, I can't, my memory's not as good as yours, so, because I'm like always living, it seems, in the moment. But the reason why I bring this up is, it seems to me that one of the, you know, I mean, obviously mass transit's very important for the city, and that's something we can continue to pursue. But it seems to me that a way that we can really affect the quality of life of the citizens here is to make it so that they have effective ways to transport other than a car. And bike, it's, for people in the counties, I'm not sure that because their distances are so much greater, they have a hard time understanding bike. So they hate bike lanes, they hate.
The bike's for the kids, not for them.
I'm saying, it's not that, it's hard to appreciate because they have greater distances, really, is what I think it is. But if you live in the city, you understand, it's like, I live in the city, so I'm in the West End, but I'm only 2.5 miles from downtown. And, you know, there's a lot of people who live there and live in your district that would probably like to bike downtown, but it's not really a safe way. You can try to do it down Monument or something, or, you know, but there's not really a safe way to do it. I know y'all work almost like, I I understand, let me just finish. He's gonna say, we're working on getting it down Floyd or whatever, yeah, Floyd, Elwood, whatever it is. I know what you're talking about, Floyd. But I'm not just worried about the West End, I'm talking about people from all over. So, you all know a couple things. The way I've understood it is whatever the state's negotiated amount of money it gets from the state on lane miles is very handsome as it relates to like a lot of jurisdictions, probably 90% of the jurisdictions in the state. So we get a handsome amount of money because you all way back when negotiated a different deal than like Chesterfield. Chesterfield they get state money by state lane mile, whatever. Henrico, back at the turn of the century, the Bird Machine, they got a different deal that goes way, way back. And what I understand is they get paid for lane mile and parking. Y'all don't get the parking lane miles. You don't get money for that. So I'm putting that in there just for you to think about. But the reason why I brought that up is that could be a strong argument for converting some of these areas that maybe you pick different places where you want that to be the bike corridor, and you figure out where to put these in the parking places. But it's got to be places, obviously, that aren't massively under need for parking. Anyway, all I'm saying is, if y'all can think, it really, to me, and it needs to be urban planners that do it. I can't do it. You got all the urban planners, so they know what to do. But to the extent you can encourage the development, the greater development of more bike miles in an extremely comprehensive way, I think long-term that will inure the benefit of the entire Richmond populace. And I encourage you to do that in any way we can help at the General Assembly. That's something that I would be fired up to do.
I just want to follow back on the comment as relates to transit, and I appreciate the biking. But the need for transit, mass transit, is a lot, is really what we need to continue to push for this regional transportation, for mass transit as well. And so I'm wondering if there's anything.
Okay, so remember when we got about 2 or 3 years ago, and it went over the course of about a 6 or 7 year period, that we were getting into it about the expressway, the RMA? You remember how we were fighting over that for like 7 years, and I was tooth and nail? All right, so here's the idea, okay? You finally have an entity there, and this is something for the mayor because the administration, as they're starting to think about, here's what you've got. You've got needs, you don't have money, right? Okay, we got needs, we don't have money. Not one of y'all ran on that you were gonna raise taxes, okay? And we're not gonna raise taxes either. So what we have basically is a situation where we have needs, not money. And as it relates to mass transit, I think you've got an entity there that could be used. But y'all are gonna have to try to attempt at some point to get on the same sheet of music with with Henrico and Chesterfield. They have needs too. And to the extent that the council for Richmond City and the mayor agree on wanting something, whatever it would cost, okay. Chesterfield, they want something for whatever it is that they want to do, and Henrico has things that they would want to do. If everybody gets something out of it from their particular standpoint, then you could cut a regional deal there and figure out how you want to pay for it. if you all would agree on how you want to pay for it, and you came to us, and this was something that was desirous of the region, and it's going to be good for the economics of the region. Obviously, you all you people who are involved, all the elected officials from the region who want to do this, who are in the best position to know directly, because you're the closest to the people, what would long-term affect the economics for the region, then I'm happy to go fight the fight for it at the General Assembly to get you the desired result there. Because you're going to need to ask us, if y'all want to raise the money in a particular way, the state has to provide you the permission to do it. So what I'm saying is, to the extent that we get the regional buy-in to do these things you want to do, then we are going to be, I can speak for myself, I can't speak for my colleagues, but I can speak for myself that if the localities I represent, which I represent Chesterfield, Henrico, and the city of Richmond, if all y'all want these things, I can go to the people that I represent and say, this is a necessity that's going to enhance the quality of life for our entire region, and this is what we need to do. And that's what we'll do. So that's the whole idea, and I think that this is not an easy thing to accomplish. You can't do it with the platitude and say that you can't make an announcement. It's going to take work behind the scenes to get the buy-in and to get the people working together on what it is they want to do. Okay, and it's not easy. But to the extent that you've got good young leadership here, they might be able to. And the thing about it is, it's interesting. The region has changed dramatically in the 10 years I've been there. They have much younger, newer leadership in Chesterfield. The board in Henrico's changed dramatically. They've got new leadership in both of the managerial positions in Henrico and Chesterfield. So really, it's an extremely opportune time to have the discussions to look forward to the next 50 years. Mass transit is desirous from the city's perspective. It's not necessarily on their first thing. But if you drive out to Short Pump, it's a situation that they're going to be looking to solve in the next 50 years. These are situations that have to be addressed, and they know it. People are thoughtful, so I think it'd be a good opportunity to have that sort of discussion.
Illustrate the point, at the last meeting of the Capital Region Caucus, GRTC made a presentation on the pulse. And one of the hardest, the question was asked by Delegate Peter Farrell, who represents Short Pump, when is it coming to Short Pump? And one of the other delegates from Henrico said, why are you so hot to get it to Short Pump? He said, because my people need employees, and those people need jobs, and I'm about connecting the people to jobs. So.
Well, I know that one of the things that has been talked about, at least from GRTC's David Green, is looking at trying to get something onto like the regional sales tax that could go to regional transit, regional transportation. But the way that the state code is right now, our population in the region isn't qualified because we're too small of a region compared to Hampton Roads in Northern Virginia. So is that something that the General Assembly would look to reduce the cap so that the Richmond region could qualify?
So Parker, I think you should function. You need to understand the function of how it works. You want something, okay? You're never going to get it the way you want it, But there are other people that have wants too, and you can work together to reach. If Henrico were to say we want to do some kind of tax, it's highly unlikely Henrico alone could go to the General Assembly and get the tax, okay? But if Henrico, Richmond, and Chesterfield are together. And see, they don't necessarily, you really want a greater amount of mass transit. Some of them might want it, but some of them might not. But they might want something else, okay? And so let them have something, you have something, and then agree how we're going to pay for all of this, you see? So you get what you want, you're working with other people to get what you want. Do you follow me? Does that make sense?
And Delegate Rapazzi, I do, because I serve on both the Regional Planning District and the Regional Transportation Organization. So these are conversations that we have as a region. And we're sitting there saying, but we can't do it because the legislation isn't there for us yet. So if we came forth and said, we need to amend the legislation so that a region that's smaller could take advantage of that program, you could do it. You could either do it for a special exemption for the Richmond region, or you could do it statewide so that other communities that have equal population sizes would be impacted equally.
Ron, correct me if I'm wrong, and Parker, maybe you know the answer, maybe Betsy or Manoli or Jennifer. Isn't the baseline to create a regional transportation authority to even begin having discussion, $1.5 million?
That is correct, and it is, Delegate Lapasi was alluding to, what the General Assembly said, it can lower or raise. Or
Right,
whatever we want.
and our regional population is what, 1.1 million? So we wouldn't qualify until we have 400,000 more people living in the 5 or 6 localities that make it up. But if the General Assembly were to lower that to 1 million, the only region in the state that would apply to would be ours. It wouldn't affect Charlottesville, wouldn't affect Shenandoah Valley. That would be it. But we can't even begin those discussions unless that is dropped. I don't know what the temperature is.
Let me give you, I think there's a few of us still have enough, who have enough gray hair to remember. Remember the convention center?
Yeah.
How did that happen? Richmond, Henrico, Chesterfield came together, said, we want to do this, then went to the General Assembly, said, we need help, here's how we propose to do it, and the General Assembly bought into it.
Here's what I'm trying to tell you. You can't say, give me the blank check. I'll tell you, that'll be later. If you work with the region to come up with the thing, and then if y'all say, well, why not, I don't care how you do it. I'm suggesting to Parker, the RMA is already set up, it's already there, it's an entity that's capable of doing all this, okay? You can do it today. You don't need me to change the legislation. The legislation exists to do it. It's already got an organization that can do mass transit, it can do anything, it can do just about anything or anything you want, okay? So it's already there. Now, I get what you're saying. You're saying, well, Luke, if you would just change it from 1.4, whatever it is, to 1, or whatever the number is, just move it down, then we'll have the ability to do all this, okay? What I'm telling you is you didn't get it for a reason.
No, I
You didn't get it for a reason because we didn't think that the region was ready to work together yet to have the money to blank check. So what I'm saying is, to the best of your ability, if we can get the region working together, then we'll work with you to try to do anything.
Let me ask
I'm
you
not
this.
saying you don't or no, but I'm just saying.
Because I know you know more about the RMA than anybody here, but does the RMA have the ability, we know that the board's equalized, but do we have the ability to, or the okay from the state to perhaps raise certain taxes that the regional transportation authorities have? Does the RMA have that ability? If everybody on the board agrees, or is it, do we need that permission from the assembly?
If you, and, pardon?
Authority from the General Assembly.
The RMA would.
We would need authority.
Yeah.
So either way, we need the authority, because I remember when this was discussed before it was ruled unconstitutional back in 2008 or whatever. Because everybody was talking about, okay, well, we're gonna raise, a state inspection fee by $1, or, there were all these tiny little things that added up, but they weren't doubling the state inspection fee from 20 to 40. It might go up 50 cents per car or whatever, but it was literally nickel and dime for auto repair for, a penny on gas here, or, I think Novo raised it, 5 cents or something? And so, but without that authority, I don't think the RMA would be able to raise that kind of money, so it would have to come from the localities all chipping in.
The RMA cannot do anything, can't do a new project, it can't do a new thing without the agreement of the Richmond City Council and the mayor, the board of Henrico, and the board of Chesterfield. So if all y'all agree to do it, it can be done, then they're gonna, obviously, you've approved what their game plan's gonna be. It's not funded, okay? Then you come to us and say, hey, we've all got agreement. I've gotten it passed by the board of Chesterfield, the board of Henrico, Richmond City Council, and that mayor, and he's got the power to veto it. And the mayor agrees, this is what's best for the region. And then I speak for myself, I can't speak for all my colleagues here, but I speak for myself that in that situation, I'm gonna go fight for what you all want to do.
Do it in reverse of the way it was set up before it got ruled.
Because remember why Central Virginia was not a included in the transportation bill to begin with. It was because Richmond, Henrico, and Chesterfield couldn't even answer the question whether they wanted a regional authority that they'd all work in. And so for us, we're like, well, if y'all can't work together, why are you coming to us to ask you to give you something that you've proven to us you can't use because you won't agree on how to use it? So you gotta do it in the reverse. And it's a lot easier for us to sell it to other members outside of the region if we can say, look, they're all on the same page, we're all on the same page, let us do it.
And then I think once it comes to us, or the information, once they're well organized, then it's incumbent upon us to also look at what additional tools you may need to make sure that this is passed. Make sure that it's a buy-in.
So let me, real quick, I think, so if we were to find general consensus, then we could then either do it through the Regional Transportation Authority way, or you would grant the authority to the RMA. So the assembly could do it through either one of those channels if the localities got on board.
Yeah, don't pass,
So I think,
papers, resolutions.
Right.
if I'm hearing this conversation, I think that's always the case, as long as the local, what I'm hearing you say, as long as the local government is willing to create the means by which to achieve it and pay for it, we can approach you for authorization to approve those sources of taxation or revenue generated that we would propose. What I'm asking, in addition to that, because it would be fabulous if the authority would have the authority to proceed with revenue without having to get the blessing of the state. I'm just saying it would be fabulous. However, we know that's not the case. Because at the end of the day, we're paying the cost. But is there, I understand that's the policy. I didn't say it wasn't. I said it was fabulous, it wasn't. But the bottom, does the state have or would pursue legislation that would enhance the cooperation for economic development, that public transit would carry more weight as it relates to the support of economic development for the region?
The only thing I can say on is this. I think it's already done. You got that, it's not RMTA.
RMTA.
Whatever, RMTA.
Same thing,
Yeah.
just different name, same animal.
Okay, and that right there is an entity that exists currently that has mechanisms in place. The reason why we changed it the way we did is so that if you want to raise taxes in the United States of America, elected officials have to make that decision, not appointed people, okay? So you're going to be coming to me and saying, this is what we want to do, and this is why, and we think it's a good idea, and we want you to raise the tax. And then I'm going to agree with you, and if the people disagree with you, they can fire you because you're answerable to the people. So it's got to be a good idea, and it's got to be one that the body politic agrees that that's what they want to have done, and I think it's going to be one that'll have the consensus that it will, if you get it through council, then I believe, and you get it through the other two bodies, and I believe you've got the consensus there to achieve what you want to achieve.
This has been the best discussion we've ever had at one of these. Ms. Gray, you have a
You go.
Yeah.
Okay, just to go back over the lane mile reimbursement for bike lanes, it's my understanding that came up again and failed. Is that?
Well, that was to extend it to other cities.
Okay, so we are currently,
We're just very good.
and that's in perpetuity, or?
No, I thought it was just 2 years.
I thought it was just for that budget.
No, it's not for that budget. It wasn't budget, it was statute.
So we are currently,
Richmond's uniquely treated to that.
so we are still, and if we add miles, are
I
they?
think we're capped at 50 miles
Okay.
right now.
I had a few that didn't make it onto the list, and that was my fault for not getting it on time.
Before we do that, Ellen had asked about two other issues I just want to answer. Yes, there will be school prison pipeline legislation that was passed last year that didn't make it. There'll be a follow-up to that. On blight, we actually passed something last year that should give you a tool that I think Betsy can go into more detail about, the Land Bank Entities Act. And Betsy, I don't know if you want to go into detail on that, but.
Well, I just want to see if anything was done with it in the Richmond area. We've all been able to utilize it.
There is legislation that's in place for us to put the policies and procedures for implementation. It is in process.
Okay.
I think as a practical matter, any other bills introduced to try to address blight are gonna run into the, well, what have you done with the tools you already have? And until you can answer, we use those tools, but we still need more, I'm not sure you'll get that.
Well, if we already know that there are some impediments, with the current legislation that is creating an impediment for us, we can bring that to you. Yes.
Delegate Carr, Delegate McQueen, I know there's some things that came up at the appropriations retreat that you wanted to share with the group vis-a-vis the money situation and also what's going on with local, what's going to probably change with regard to local government oversight by the state as a result of Petersburg.
So that, just a general picture that we got was that there's, as you probably heard, going to be scarce funds available because of the less incoming to the state coffers, more money being required for Medicare, and also the things like our state troopers are really in dire circumstances, and we really need to do something for their salaries, for their compensation. We're losing them. They're very well trained. They're being hired by Texas, other states all over because they're so well trained, but they're so underpaid here, and they have such demands on them. So I think that, as you probably saw in the paper, that's going to be one of the key things. Another thing that, as Ron mentioned, we had this presentations on oversight of local governments, kind of using the case, spoken and unspoken, the case history of Petersburg, and being able to have kind of flags of when local governments are going to be heading in the wrong direction and stopping them, giving them support and oversight before they get 5 years down the road, which is what's happened in the case of Petersburg.
I think if I could read the tea leaves, that would be increased reporting by local government to the state auditor of public accounts on finances in a more of a real-time basis. And the state auditor would probably put together a website that had a dashboard where at any point in time you could look at the financial health of any local government.
Another thing that may affect Richmond or not is that the discussion presentation on drug courts, and I know that they've been very effective and received a lot of support. I've been to a number of drug court graduations myself, and they're very good. But they're looking at those in terms of having some forms of accountability and looking at graduation rates, but also just the outcomes of those. So that last year, Richmond was like the third best in the state, but we don't know, what kind of things would they put in, more oversight or more regulations for the whole thing that would affect. But I know that that's a really important issue.
And basically, that's the same thing that I was going to just talk about, the fiscal stress that are on localities, and the fact that I'm a Baptist preacher, about the fiscal stress and the fact that they are going to be the greatest scrutiny and accountability, and that's the bottom line, that things are on time, and if they come on time, that they're able to audit, they're able to look at it and see exactly what's going on, and then hopefully if there are localities that need help, they can swoop in before it gets to a situation that we are dealing with in the state. And then, again, the drug courts, you all ought to be, the city of Richmond, be extremely proud of themselves in terms of what the data says about what you're doing. But even with that, there were some questions that were raised, how are these numbers counted? How do you obtain the data? So just hopefully everything is working extremely well, and then whatever is reported
it is certainly in the right standing because, again, I think that's going to be another issue that's going to be well scrutinized. Everybody's not necessarily for drug courts. And I think that it came before us because they were also looking at the funding, how much funding is going toward drug courts and if it will continue. So,
And that's a fight every year.
every year.
Yeah.
Every year.
Yeah, always some people.
Well, I think this, I was taken aback by that. I think overall, at least among the members of the Appropriations and Finance Committees, there seemed to be general support for drug courts. Most of the questions, from my perspective, seem to be about, did General Assembly provide additional money in this biennium for drug courts that are up but not receiving state money? We're about process for awarding that money, how some of those decisions were made, and better reporting to, in terms of outcomes, especially on a longitudinal basis. But it's different than sitting in the courts committee talking about drug courts, a lot different.
And I think outcomes was, again, there was some real sensitivity to outcomes because, you know, again, Richmond was doing pretty good in this, being third highest report in terms of graduation rate. The recidivism was good. I mean, so there were some things. So I think that's why people want to better understand in terms of the data that came in and what it is saying and how they obtained it and whatnot. So I would just encourage you all to do, even as a council, make sure that you are scrutinizing your drug courts and that the information that's coming is valid.
So there's one other thing I'd like to mention. We have an epidemic right now with a new drug that is causing we're having a lot of overdose, and I don't remember the street name of it. For the drug epidemic that we have going on. And I know that our chief of police has formed a coalition with state and local representatives as it relates to the treatment for that, but the cost is extreme, and it's not just a Richmond problem, it really is, it's a national problem. But I would wonder whether or not that's something from the state that we should at least be having a more detailed discussion about what's happening at the state level and how Richmond can be supported, because I mean, I think we said someone reported to us at council meeting that we had like 20 overdose, and out of that just this weekend, just one weekend, and out of that 3 of them did not make it, but the antidote that is available is very effective in reversing it, but we can't afford to provide the antidotes. And on the poverty thing again, I would also like to suggest that we, and I don't know whether this is a daylight thing that we need. I've been trying for years to try to look at policies, local, state, and federal policy that tends to hinder people being locked into poverty situations. In this morning's paper, it's a classic example of the fact that we take away people's driver's license because they have court fees and those kinds of things, and how we could really look at those policies that are continuing to create problems and how we can address that at the state level.
So, yeah.
All right, so
After he finishes, Delegate McCall, let's go get the last word.
Mr. Sanders had something that he needed to say as well.
Okay.
After we've talked about what the city wants, I have a request from us. But he has a lot to say on this.
All right, so I spent 2 years trying to get us to study the issue of suspending people's license because you can't get to work, and you know it falls more onerously on people that don't have financial wherewithal to pay their fines and costs. So I finally got them to do the study, and yeah, Jennifer's gonna be on it. And anyway, it got they filed this lawsuit in Charlottesville. So it's a federal lawsuit, it's pretty common, it's a class action. So since they filed a class action, we didn't feel like it was appropriate to be dealing with it because they were gonna haul our commissioner into court and stuff, Commissioner D&B and all. So we're kind of waiting to see how this settles out in the courts, and then we'll figure it out.
And the problem is, the General Assembly does not typically take up an issue that is pending in litigation. That's bad. The good news is the federal court might sort this out for us. the other good news is the fact that Finola was able to get that study done shows that there's more political will now to address that issue than there was before. But now we have to wait.
But I think that there are other policies that, as well as this, that we should at least be trying to create an inventory of what those kind of policies are, like the licenses, but others that are having the same adverse impact, and so we can begin to be proactive toward those as well. But I'm glad to hear what's being done, and hopefully the federal court will solve the problem for us.
Mr. Samuels.
Mine are quick, I will be as brief as possible. In 1980, grand larceny amendment was added that raised from $100 to $200 the threshold. In 2016 money, that would be $616. Reversing that, if we keep it at $200 now, understand that in 1980, that was only $64. I know the Commonwealth Attorneys groups don't like it, but I would ask that we consider raising it to $500 or $1,000. I don't understand why I can take a sledgehammer, permanently destroy and remove from the ability to use with intent a person's television by breaking it to a million pieces, and only be sentenced to 12 months in jail. But if I pick up the TV and walk out of the house to permanently deprive them with it, then I'm looking at up to 20 years.
That's introduced every year.
I know, but I wanted to raise it because I think that's important.
So, Mr. Stevens, I proposed it like 3 or 4 years ago, and I saw what happened, and I'm like, okay, I'm not done today, I'm not chasing windmills. It's not necessarily just the Commonwealth's attorney, it's the, what?
The retail merchants.
Yeah, the retail merchants. So if you can get the retail merchants, then I'll be glad to carry legislation, but, you know, the merchants are against it, it just makes it difficult. You're right, everything you just said, 100% agree with, but it's just,
And that's on the legislative black caucus agenda every year.
Yeah, it is.
We're committed.
And it makes no sense, none whatsoever. I mean, anyone with any kind of logical thinking, rational thinking at all, look at it. Maybe I shouldn't say that, but anyway, I did.
So, and then the other three are very, very easy. The circuit court clerks are not instructed to forward commitment orders to CCRE, but the general district court clerks are. What happens if one of those is appealed and is not sustained? The person is still under a disability that is now illegally under a disability. And I've had to fight those cases to win them because it's obvious that the state is wrong, but it costs the person money and they get arrested, they get thrown in jail, all because no one told CCRE that they're not cleared up anymore. And I've got the code sections, I'll send you guys on that. The other one is that the Commonwealth Attorney's Office under state law is mandated to represent the petitioner on temporary detention orders at the circuit court level. However, other laws prevent the petitioner from speaking to the Commonwealth's attorney because they are in a different department. So for example, Henrico Mental Health is the petitioner in Henrico for most of the TDOs there. They are not allowed to talk to the Commonwealth's attorney on appeal. So my counterpart, when I appeal these, goes into court without the underlying order, without the TDO, without the independent examiner's first report, without the pre-screen admission report, and has to rely basically on her wits. She's a great lawyer, but she has to rely on her wits to try to move these cases forward. It's a major problem for her. The alternative is, because there's no lawyer required in the general district court on these, you could remove the Commonwealth attorney's obligation or mandate and probably save the state some money that way. And then lastly, there is no privacy guarantees for these appeals the way there are for like juveniles. And I'd ask you to consider just updating either the appeal statute or the privacy statute under 37.2 so that it mirrors general district and circuit court as they go forward.
I'm the chief cat herder. As it's approaching the bewitching hour, we had two hands up. Delegate Carr, and then Ms. Newton.
I was just talking about the driver's license and so forth, and I know that we're trying to work on that study. There's also that Drive to Work organization here in the city, which I think is effective.
I just wanted to ask if you would take a look at the CSBs and whether or not they are going back to Ellen's point about substance. Oftentimes they'll provide resources to the CSBs for substance, and I wanted to see if there's
They've got a
anything that
big
we can
increase
add that would
in the
support.
current, they got a big increase in the current budget, but we'll go back and look.
But with, yeah, at least that would be a start. It'd be great if it would be specific in terms of addressing the current.
No, I know the governor has a task force that's looking.
Okay.
With that, it's 1:30, we promised to get you out of here by 1:30. This is, as I indicated, this is, I've been doing this about 10 years with you guys. This is the best discussion we've ever had. And I want to thank you all for that. Thank you for coming. And Ms. Mosley, you want to close?
Yes, this has been the most engaging discussion. I have enjoyed it. I'm hoping that some of the things that we've discussed, as Delegate Lupasi said, they have been going on for such a long period of time. I'm hoping we can move them from the discussion section to the reality section. My hope is that we get the support we need to move the city forward to a much better place. I want to acknowledge all of the departing members of council. Thank you, Charles, for being here. Myself, we're here, and we were intricate into the conversation, and so I thank you for your service. This is our last legislative summit, and I want us to be thankful to everyone for all the hard work on behalf of this great city. Thank you so much for coming. To the new members and the mayor-elect, you have our support, and we wish you great success. When you succeed, the city succeeds. Enjoy the rest of your afternoon.